Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in life as a military wife. And because we are entering the month of May, and in the month of May, we've got not only Mother's Day, but Military Spouse Appreciation Day, I'm going to take this time with the podcast to explore the contributions of military spouses in their communities. And this week is a conversation between myself and a military spouse named Cynthia. And she is going to tell us about all of the things she's doing as her life of a military wife and work with charities and different things. So join me as we go along this journey to explore the lives of military spouses this month. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Just a quick public service announcement. I apologize if my microphone quality is less than par. I'm having technical issues with it and I'm having to replace it, and the replacement has not arrived yet. So bear with me, please, as we go forth with this. But that said, I just want to again express the gratitude I have for these military spouses who took time out of their crazy schedules to sit down and do an interview with me on these different topics and share what they are doing in their lives as a way to celebrate the contributions of military spouses to our communities and the world at large. Because there are so many amazing military spouses out there who are doing fabulous things every single day, and they are just not used to thinking of it as an exceptional contribution because it's their daily life. And I feel it's important for us to recognize them and their work. So that is part of what we are going to be doing. That said, I want to jump into this conversation and we're just going to have some fun. Okay, Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, my name is Cynthia. I am now the wife of a veteran. My husband's been out of the military going on 6 years now. Yeah, 2019. Yeah, 6 years now. So, um, we were in for 7 years and now we're on the civilian side of things. So,
When you were switching from being military spouse and he was getting out, what was that like for you and your kids and trying to figure out what the next phase was going to look like?
I would say it was both fun and chaotic at the same time because it's like, okay, we knew getting out was coming up. Definitely a lot sooner than we had expected, but we knew it was coming up. So it was fun to be like, okay, sit down with him, sit down with the family, and be like, what are the next steps? What is it we want to do? Where is it we want to go? You know, do we want to come back? We came back to Arizona. That's where we're originally from, with family and stuff here. Or do we want to go somewhere else? During our time in the military, we really enjoyed the environment at Fort Campbell in the Kentucky, Tennessee area. So that was also an option on the table. But it was also chaotic at the same time, making sure that we got everything done on the military side of things, making sure that the packers and movers were lined up, making sure that he had all of his stuff returned. And so it was both chaotic and fun to try and envision where you were going to go for your next steps.
And as the kids were adjusting to that, do you think it was easier for them because they've already done a lot of moves to just do another move? Or did it feel different?
I think it was easier for them because we had been through it enough times. The youngest one at the time, this was his first move, his first chaos. So, you know, that first child in their first move, they're like, why is my stuff being touched? Where is my stuff going? I don't understand. So I found it easy to always hype it up. Like, we're going to go see your Nana and we're going to go. We had traveled across the country one time with him, a few months before that. So it was okay, I'm going to go for a car ride, and there's something at the end of that road for me. Um, but the rest of them, it was no problem. It was like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a unique experience, and I know this a little bit, but you're part of the reason why it was so sudden for you guys to be getting out is because your husband was going to get medically discharged because he was having health issues, which meant you were going to have to look at getting a job and helping be a provider because you guys are still sorting out health stuff. What was that like for you to be switching from being a stay-at-home mom into back into the workforce and that dynamic?
At first it was really easy just because knowing we were getting out and knowing we had to have things lined up, we had a lot of family and friends help to be like, hey, we're coming home. I'm going to need a place to live. So we were able to like start searching. I think with today's day and age, it's a lot easier because you're able to do things virtually with realtors and rental agencies, and you can talk to them over long distances to solve that problem, right? So once we got there and got settled, it's like, okay, what do I want to do? And it was kind of exciting at the same time because I just graduated getting my degree in accounting. So I was like, okay, what opportunities are going to be there? But at the same time, you're like, don't know if anything's going to be there. So it was a little scary. Like, can we afford this? Can we do this? But we tried to make sure that we could afford, and we had a lot of help, I think, is what made that really easy. So I was okay with it. I think now being back out of it so many years, I actually miss the stay at home mom side of things. I really do.
You know, it's crazy, but it's like a good crazy.
Yeah.
You guys started out in the Phoenix Valley area and then you made another switch to another area. And I know you are working with a really great organization. And what is that? So why don't you explain what you're doing now, like what you started off doing, and then what it led to and how you got where you're at?
What it started off as, actually, like I said, I had just graduated from college. I had actually started. I wanted to go into accounting to help soldiers, especially young soldiers just in the military, to help understand finances. Being the wife of a soldier and coming home and being like, I have so many new soldiers that need help. They get the sign on bonuses, they got the deployment bonuses, and they're young and like, come back, let me buy this brand new car. And they got roped into a lot of financial trouble. That was one of the biggest things as a military family we had to learn when he did join was going from two incomes down to one. So it actually became fun to learn how to do finances. And so I wanted to share that with the soldiers. So I took that degree and we were down in the valley, moved again, and realized we did not miss the constant moving in the military because we're like, oh, we have to do it again, but this time without the military's help. So now we're settled, and now I'm up here, and I'm actually gone into the world of social work, which was completely different. But I still get to help. I help veterans who need it. We still get to use accounting to help those that need it and stuff. So I've actually grown and developed, and I really enjoy what it's blossomed into.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have seen that too, and we've discussed this that there are just so many 18, 19-year-olds who've never made that kind of money before and they get into the army and all of a sudden they think they're wealthy and they start spending their money on excessive things and building up tons of debt because they're like, I've got a stable income, it doesn't matter. And then something happens and they get injured or something and all of a sudden or they get married and now all of a sudden they're trying to provide for a family and they're drowning in debt and you're just like that's why you should have saved. Like you didn't need to spend that money. Just because it's in your pocket doesn't mean you have to give it to someone else. You can hold on to it. And so it's really great that you're working with veterans because I know it can be hard for veterans too. They've gone from this world where maybe they joined up at 18 and they have had a steady paycheck and a steady job, and they knew where they were going to live and they knew how they were going to provide for themselves or their families. And then they get out and maybe they're injured or they don't have a lot of educational background and they're trying to figure out now how to provide for themselves and maybe a family too. And they don't always have the skills or the resources or the know how to navigate that change in life. So, what kind of things do you do with the veterans that you're helping?
Some of them, again, it's social work side, particularly in the housing segment side of things. I work very closely with the VA and the nation's finest. And so we work with that. I think, and I'm kind of going to go back a little bit because you're like, it's a scary world. I remember being in the military and a bunch of us women were together, and it was a time where reassignments were coming up. And they were sitting there talking about the wives. They're like, I don't know if we can go civilian because I don't know if we can up the insurance. Even the thought of that is really scary. Just health insurance alone. So that's what we do. There is great organizations and great people out there that will help families and soldiers walk through all of that, and working beside these agencies to better those transition is what we're really trying to go for.
And what organization are you working with currently? Just because if people are looking for these resources, they can maybe check out where the group you're with.
Um, Catholic Charities.
I love
So
that. Don't be hesitant to say that. I
yeah,
think sometimes people think we have to rely on the government to take care of our veterans, and they
right.
don't realize how much churches are doing to help our veterans. So don't be afraid to go get help from churches. Maybe you're not super religious. Maybe you're still trying to figure out your relationship with God. That's fine. Those churches are still very willing to help communities and veterans, and we don't need to go to the government for everything.
Right. And there are individuals out there who have a really bad taste for the government in their mouth when they get out because something could have happened during their time in service. So they are afraid to reach out to those agencies, especially with these agencies being in the news a lot lately of frauding and defunding and all that sort of stuff. It is a scary thing. Like, do I want to put my trust into that agency? Um, but those of us that have our boots on the ground and are trying to make that better, there are people out there that like really do want to walk you through everything, even part of those agencies that really are just really trying.
Yeah, it's true. And it's because it's just everything's a little unstable and switching from one career to another can be hard enough, but switching from military to civilian is a completely different mentality. And it's not uncommon. We've encountered people who are end up with housing struggles because
Yeah.
they're so used to being housed by the military or having a housing allowance by the military, they're uncomfortable and just don't know how to navigate housing and maybe have other struggles that are making finding housing even harder. And so there are homeless veterans and there are organizations that will help homeless veterans learn the skills they need and acquire the stuff they need so that they can get the housing and the stability they need.
Right. Exactly. And not just housing, but every aspect. I think one of the biggest things that I see with transitions is mental health with not just the single soldiers, but with the single soldiers and the families. Being in the military, one of the things that in the Army does, I don't know about other branches, but we had marriage retreats and make like taking what we learned from those marriage retreats and holding on to those because you can fight as a couple and you get frustrated with each other because the future's unknown. It's a little scary on this side of things. I think is the biggest thing is just there are so many resources out there. It's okay to reach out to somebody and talk to somebody, and you'll be better for it.
It's true. I think universally, everyone I've spoken to on the veteran side and even active duty, mental health is major, and then marriage help because being a first responder, being a military, all of those sorts of things put stress and strain on your relationships because you have a commitment that is equal to your marriage. Because defending our country, sometimes that has to come before your wife and kids, and that can be really hard on a marriage, especially if you're not on the same page. And then transitioning out, the wives are so used to upheaval and we're used to reinventing ourselves and figuring things out, but the guys aren't. They're used to always having a mission, always having a team, always having a support system. And then all of a sudden they get out and they don't have that team. They don't have that purpose. They don't have that set of like responsibility anymore. And then now it's up to them to figure it out. And if they're struggling with figuring it out, that can cause a lot of anxiety and depression and stress.
Exactly. I think because it was a medical discharge with my husband and it wasn't something that we had both decided, it was like, well, sorry, we're not able to use your services anymore. You have to get out. That was a very notable thing. It was like, I'm depressed and stuff like that. And you see that even with the veterans today that are out and, it's scary things. So, like you said, finding that group to replace that camaraderie, that team with, sorry, I can't say that word, to replace that team with and that support structure with, but being there together with your, working on marriage retreats, working on mental health is such a huge thing. And involve the children too, like for the full families that get out, like what would you like to see? And because it's different for them. They're used to having all the kids knowing the same things they do, getting, all their parents that were involved in the military are deployed, or they have the one that stays home. And so even the children had other children around them that knew what they were going through. They get out and they don't know. They're like, their friends don't know anything about being in military life and stuff like that, and constantly having to move.
Yeah. And I didn't even think of that. You're right. It's got to be hard on those kids who are no longer in a military community because now all of a sudden they're with kids who are probably living next to their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles and cousins, and their family have lived there forever. Maybe their families have moved around a lot, but there's a lot of local kids who've never been uprooted. And all of a sudden they just, they're the new kid, but they're not the new kid with a lot of other new kids. And there's always new kids. They're just the new kid. And that can be different because with my kids going into a school in a military community, there's always a new kid. You might be the new kid today, but there might be another new kid next week and it'll be fine. But when you move in and you're the only new kid, and you might be the only new kid that moves in for years, that can be really just put a spotlight on you and cause some adjustment issues and insecurities. And I hadn't thought of that. You're right.
Yeah, so we made sure that whenever we did make these last couple move choices, we included the children. Like, this is coming up. This is what has to happen. What are your thoughts on it? And they were, I think that first initial transition out of the military was so easy because they're like, yeah, let's go back and see Nana and Tata. That's where we want to go. But they do often talk about, oh, I miss this person in the military. We were such good friends. But I see it now that they drive towards the new kids in their class now. Like, oh, mom, we got a new kid in class. And they're the first to make friends with them. And because they know they've been there so many times. They're like, yep, we got this.
It really does teach empathy and compassion. And I love that because they can understand why it would be hard for someone else to do what they've done. Do you
Yeah,
guys have a lot of veterans in your community with like families, or are the veterans tend to be older? Do your kids have a lot of other kids that understand what they've been through?
they do not. We tend to have a lot of older retired or singles. We actually got really blessed to meet another family. I work with her who happened to be stationed in New York with just a couple week time frame missing each other. Like we've been to the same locations together. So we kind of understand like when we talk about, oh, I missed this place. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was so great. So even starting that new position, meeting her and knowing I was like, it made it easy on me as well. Like, this is great. I have somebody to talk to about this. But
It
that is
really,
fun.
it does. It's like a community. It's a huge community. It's amazing how I can meet someone and just finding out they're in the military and we just start talking. All of a sudden, there's this like camaraderie and kinship that you wouldn't build as quickly with another random stranger. It really is a big family. And I love that.
It is, and it's fun. Even the clients we talk to, or the people we work with in those different organizations that were involved in the military. My husband started a new position, and he's like, "Yeah, I worked with like two veterans, and the way they talk, they just military talk right away, and kind of built that kinship and that team. And he works easier with those guys than he does with others who hadn't been in the military."
And it's not that we don't want to like click with other people. It's just, it's hard when they don't understand your frame of reference. And honestly, the military really does attract certain personalities. And so, kind of if they've been in the military, they probably have certain similar mental approaches to things that you probably do and different
Yeah,
just world outlooks. There's a military sense of humor, and I feel like it's ubiquitous. And that's one thing that like people outside of the military don't always get military humor because it's sometimes a little dark and
yeah.
morbid, but it's how we put up with and survive these things we go through. But yeah, it really does help you connect with people. And I love hearing when veterans are finding that community, that connection. But you don't have to just be a veteran to do that or a veteran family to do that. I love the fact that you're working with the Catholic Charities and there are people who have no military connections who are genuinely trying to reach out to these veterans and help and love and support them, even if it's not something they can relate to.
Right. Right. And I think that was one thing I missed is we've been in the military so long. You move into a new place, it's like all the wives and stuff instantly introduce you. You always have something to do, I'm going over with this group today, or, this wife today, we're going out and we're doing this. There was always that something. And we had moved back initially, back with family. I had started to get that back through some ladies through our church and stuff like that. And then we moved again. And it's a whole different environment. And so it's like trying to build that up again. It's really hard to find that group, but you long for it. It's like, no, I just want to like a little group that we go out and we do this, or we craft together or something like that. Finding the similar hobbies that we absolutely love is definitely going to be key.
Yeah, one thing I found that was low stress is we started a girls' night, like chick flick group. So it's no stress. It's just a different person like hosts everyone at their house to watch a chick flick. And that way you don't have to like think of something to entertain each other and you're not spending a whole lot of money. You do have to banish your husband and kids to another part of the house or send them off somewhere. But otherwise it's just a low stress. Everyone brings snacks and we watch a movie. And it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. Building those relationships and finding that is it's so easy in the army because I feel like in the Air Force or any military branch because y'all know you're all new and you're like, okay, I've got 6 months to make friends before who knows what happens.
Right.
And so you're not waiting around where I know that I moved a lot before the military and I was not as proactive in my moves. I'm like, I'm going to be here a while. I'll find friends eventually. And but with military, I'm only here for a minute or and so you feel more motivated to get out there and build those relationships. But I'm glad that you guys are managing to do that. And it even when you get out of the military, sometimes we still have to use that military mentality and be proactive and be like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there because everyone else already knows each other, so it's my turn.
Right. And that's the thing about moving to a smaller community too. It's like cities, you can find something somewhere and there's a lot going on, but a smaller community where they've already built those like little circles and trying to fit in somewhere is a little bit harder. And so once you get that established though and it kicks off, it's just great. I definitely like find that circle, find those connections and stuff.
Yeah, because it takes a village. That phrase is not cliche, even though people may feel it is. It really takes a village, and we really are human beings are meant to have connections and community. And I feel like that was part of what was so hard during COVID when there was isolation and all that. We need community. We need people. We need to be just conversing and hearing different perspectives and gaining different ideas. It's really great when you can talk to someone who has a completely different set of life experiences from you and learn from them. And so, yeah, I'm so glad that you guys are finding that community. I'm really proud and excited for what you're doing. And that's why I wanted to have you on, was to talk about what Catholic Charities is doing to help veterans. Because I do think sometimes we get stuck in the rut and we think the VA has to do everything for our veterans, and the VA can't do everything for all our veterans. We need religious organizations and other charities to step up and help out. I know that a lot of people have talked about the VFW and the American Legion, and those are really great organizations that reach out and help out our veterans. I know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has stepped up and made their own veterans communities there where they'll do counseling and they'll put together support groups and help connect veterans and help them find jobs. There are other churches doing this. It's not just the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or the Catholic Church. So wherever you are, whatever religion you are, or whatever religion you're comfortable going to, check and see if the local church has resources for veterans.
Right, exactly. Um, where whatever town you go to, just check out the local resources. Spend out a day, a weekend with the family, going out and checking things out. Once we moved, we learned pretty quickly, like, hey, if you go to this place and you tell them you're a local, your drinks are free. So it's like finding your little resources. I think one of the things that was fun about it is when we were in the military and we stayed at Fort Campbell area, it's really beautiful farm country out there. And well, we were like, we got into the farming community out there and we're like, it's so pretty out here. Could you imagine having chickens? So I spent years doing research, but it was just never on the cards because you were in the military, you were living on the post, you were renting a house maybe for 6 months and you were up again. That is definitely never in the cards. Um, but I did research. I was like, oh, it would be kind of fun. And now we're in a spot where we can have that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's fun and exciting to know that after so many years of research and moving that we could have that now.
Yeah. And there are so many possibilities. And that's a good mentality, is to look at it as one chapter's closing, but you've got a whole new adventure waiting for you.
Okay. I was going to say he was able to use what he learned in the military. It helped with jobs. And I think also knowing as a wife, like this is what our spouses go through in the military, we could use. But one thing I could say is if you made really good friends in the military, keep in contact with them, no matter where you guys ended up, on different sides of the country. You'll get those few relationships that are still really strong.
Yep. And my last plug for everyone is, if you're not part of the veteran community or military community, but you want to reach out and help, reach out and check with your local church or the VFW or American Legion and see if there's some way you can help the veterans in your community. Recently, we had a Vietnam soldier whose body was identified. He'd been MIA, and they could not find any family. And so a bunch of people just started blasting it out on social media that they were going to have the funeral and he was an unclaimed soldier and they just wanted people to come. Because it got blasted out on social media, they ended up finding the son. And he was able to jump on a flight and be there, an overnight flight, and be there the next morning for his dad's funeral. He thought it would be just him and maybe a handful of other people. There were hundreds of people who showed up, and he was shocked. He'd never really known his dad. And here were hundreds of people there to support him and celebrate that his dad was finally coming home.
That's really
So
cool.
I know, be those people. You know, you may not have served, you may not have anyone who has served, but you can still be a part of the community. You can still help out veterans in your area. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, Cynthia. Is there any shout outs to any organizations or things that you'd like to, information last minute you want to share with everyone?
Just really reach out. VFW and the Elks Lodge, things like that. Those are great places to start. They've been there. A lot of them have been there, and they will point you in the way. So
I want to thank Cynthia again for joining me for this episode. And please remember those resources are out there and share them with those around you who may need them. As always, please like, subscribe, share. Let's click it and stick it to the algorithm. Let's get this information out to as many people as possible. I cannot do it without you. You are the reason why this podcast is successful, and I appreciate all the feedback and support that I get. As always, let's be the good that we want to see in the world. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.